What's up, YouTube? Today on In the Shop, we're going to be talking about 6-liter turbos, some of the tools that I use to clean them out, some of the things I do, some of the stuff you should be looking for when you have them apart, and hopefully today's video is helpful. So first thing you need to do, obviously, is get this thing out of the truck. Sometimes this can be a little bit of a pain in the butt. So once you get the intercooler pipe off, and the intake tube going to the air filter, then you just got to basically take the oil feed tube, two 10mm bolts that go to the top, and then you can start working on the exhaust clamps. So the exhaust clamps will have an 11mm nut on them. The real tricky part is when these things get stuck onto the pipes. So a little technique that I use is I take an air hammer with a round bit and just gently give the pipe a little whack with the air hammer, and it'll shake the clamps free. You can do that for both the down pipe and the up pipe. Then once you get those out of the way, you're going to want to take the mounting bolts off. I have this sitting on a pedestal here so you can kind of see a little bit. There's going to be one mounting bolt on each side. And then on the plate 04 and up, there's a bolt going straight down in the back. On the early 04 and the 03, this bolt doesn't go straight down. It goes in this way. These have 10mm heads on them. This bolt on the 03s can be a little bit of a pain. Sometimes they don't like to come out. You might end up having to use a turbo socket on it. But once you get all those bolts out, then you can lift the turbo up off the pedestal. It's a little tough in the truck, and then sneak it right out the front. So the next thing you want to do is take a Sharpie, and you're going to look, and there's going to be a little spot right in here where there's a dowel. I like to mark on the heat shield here just a little line to show where that dowel is. This is going to make it a lot easier when you go to reassemble it. Another thing you can do, if you see the clamp that holds the two halves together, you can just make a little line with an arrow showing that the stud goes that way. That also definitely helps. I mean, once you've done a few of these, you don't need to mark that, but if you're only doing them every once in a while, it can be pretty easy to forget where everything goes. So if you make that mark, it helps you line everything back up for reassembly. So once you get everything marked, now it's time to take this clamp off. So just use a deep 11mm socket. You can use a little impact. You can use a ratchet if you want. Take the nut completely off. And then what I like to do is spread the clamp open and then pull it up over the seam so it's out of the way. Once you get the clamp off, I like to take a bolt and thread it into this bottom portion where the turbo normally bolts onto the pedestal. It's 8mm by 125 bolt. I thread this in here because you kind of got to go at this with a hammer, and it kind of prevents you from messing the threads up. So what I like to do is just pick it up like an inch or so above the bench, rest it against my chest, and you got to make sure the bench is under you, because sometimes once these housings pop, they go. And then just take a small hammer, starts to crack free, and there you go. So this one's actually not that bad. A lot of times when you crack these turbos open, the unison ring will be stuck on the center housing. You can see it's a little bit of a tight fit there around here. Sometimes you'll get the carbon built up in there, and this wheel will actually be stuck. Won't move. So don't be surprised when you take it apart if the turbo's been sitting around for a little while, if you have some oil in the exhaust side. If there is oil inside the housing and you have the turbo facing with the exhaust wheel down, the oil will slowly drip past the seals after a little while. Not a huge concern. So what you want to do is start inspecting this. There's a couple of versions of these turbos. If you look, this one's an updated style. It's got a little divot in here. And this was designed to help stop the turbo wheel from sticking. It doesn't really help. we still get these turbos come in stuck all the time. So another thing you're going to want to inspect is on the unison ring itself, the slot where the VGT actuator rides. This one's in good shape, but sometimes these will be worn right out to the point where this VGT actuator can move back and forth and it doesn't even activate this, doesn't spin this wheel. So you want to inspect this whole wheel, make sure there's no cracks, make sure there's no burrs, none of this stuff is worn out. Once you look at it and you see this thing is in good shape, you can take this and put it to the side for right now. So then what I start to do is just kind of look and pay attention to the way all the vanes are in here, which direction they're facing. They actually face the same way as the turbo clamp from the factory, so it should be that if you put that arrow on, like I said earlier, in the direction the turbo clamp goes, the little points of the vanes should go in that direction. Make sure you check this. If in doubt, just pay attention, draw it down on a piece of paper or put a mark somewhere on the turbo. All this stuff just kind of makes it easier when you go back together. So then we'll start to take the vanes out. And I just put these aside with the unison ring. So let's go over some of the tools you're going to use to get this turbo cleaned out. You're going to need like a little right angle grinder. Takes a little cookie wheels. You want an assortment of abrasives. I use some of these green ones when you get a real tough one. You got to be careful with these though. They will take metal off and we want to try to avoid that. We want to just take the carbon and a little bit of rust off that's built up on these things. And then the other thing that I found that has been absolutely amazing, especially for cleaning around where the vanes go on, is these wheel stud cleaners. So these are designed for when you take a wheel or a rotor off of a car, you put this on a regular drill and this goes around the wheel stud and it cleans the hub surface so you have a nice flat surface where the rotor rides. These have been absolutely awesome for cleaning around because you can go down around each individual post and clean the whole surface where all the vanes ride and get it nice and smooth. Alright guys, so let's start getting this surface cleaned up. First thing, whenever you're working with any kind of power tools, safety glasses, especially with these things, they're going to be flinging rust and carbon all over the place. You want to protect yourself. So what I like to do is get like a medium abrasive and just get this on the die grinder and just kind of look, and if you have anything real flaky, you can take a little flathead screwdriver and just kind of scrape that stuff off ahead of time. But this one, like I said earlier, this turbo is in pretty good shape, so it shouldn't take much to get this one cleaned up. So once you get this surface all cleaned up, you want to focus on making sure this surface right here and this surface right here are really clean. This surface is going to be important to the unison ring going on nice and smooth, and this surface is going to be important to making sure the turbo goes back together easily. If you don't clean this up, I mean, I know you saw how struggled a little bit getting that housing apart. It'll make it real difficult to put this turbo back together. So I just like to look and make sure that we clean all the rust out of this area, and should go back together nice and smooth. You should also go in and between this little actuator arm, just take a little flat screwdriver and you'll see there's some carbon that's going to come off in here. Just kind of scrape that, spin that over to the side. Just make sure this arm moves nice and free. Next step is going to be the exhaust housing side. So you're going to want to clean this area up, just like on the center housing section. Make sure there's no rust in here. Get this nice and clean. Help the turbo go back together easier. But what I'm going to show you now is this hub tool that I use to help clean up in this area around all these studs. So you can see how good of a job that does. I've only done about half of this. You can see all the buildup still here. Gets it nice and smooth, almost right down to bare metal. That'll help the vanes to move nice and freely on this surface. You really got to check to make sure that these sections aren't worn out or grooved out. You're going to get a little bit of pitting on them, but as long as they're not really worn, they should be good to go. Once you get both housings cleaned, the next thing you want to do is start to clean up the vanes in the unison ring. Easiest way, put it flat on a bench, just go at it with the die grinder. Like I said before, you just be careful not to take any metal off. You just want to clean these surfaces until they're smooth. Once you get that all cleaned up, you can start fitting the vanes back into the turbo. As you stick these on, you want to make sure they move nice and freely on the studs. If you have any issues, you got to clean out the bores of the vanes. Typically don't have any problems though, they go on nice and smooth. So what I like to do is take the unison ring, put it on the center housing, make sure it fits nice and easy. Doesn't get stuck on there. Plenty of clearance around here. And then put it back in the exhaust housing. So how I like to remember this is, if you're looking at the housing and you see the little notch where the dowel goes, you're going to count over 3 vanes. 1, 2, 3. And then the slot for the unison ring in the actuator, that's where that goes. So you're going to want to stick it on top of one of the vanes, and then you can just use your fingers, move the vanes one at a time, and it goes right on. Once you get it on, check its function. You can see everything moves nice and free. All set to reassemble. All right, now this is where that mark is going to come in handy. Take the housing. You see where the arrow is for your clamp. Make sure you put the clamp on. I have assembled these. If you forgot to put the clamp on, you got to pop it back apart. Don't forget. Now you can take the other side and pay attention to where this dowel is. Make sure your unison ring is centered so the vanes are in the halfway open position, and make sure your actuator on this side is centered. That way everything lines right up. Once you see that everything's lined up, you can take a little dead blow, give it a couple of whacks, it should fall right together. That's it, guys. All right, well, hopefully this helps some of you guys out. I do see a lot of questions about the proper way to clean these things. People do have different techniques. There's other ways to go about it. The most important thing is to make sure that you get those surfaces nice and clean and that the unison ring and the vanes move freely. I've seen guys take the housings, bring them home, sandblast the exhaust housing. Obviously, you can't do that on the center housing. You don't want to get any particulate inside of the oil system. But there's a couple of ways to skin the cat. I'll put a couple of links in the description about some of the tools I use, some of the abrasives, things like that. And if you guys want to see a video on how to pull these turbos out, just leave a comment in the in the comments section, and we'll get something put together for you. Hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure you subscribe. Thanks for watching In the Shop.